Hey peeps, I saw a few movies and you already know the rest. I mean, you saw the thumbnail already. The first film is called The Congress from 2013, directed by Ari Folman, who also directed the critically acclaimed animated documentary Waltz with Bashir from 2008, which is still on my watch list. I'll get to it. The Congress is a pretty original, surreal, and intimate sci-fi dystopian film starring Robin Wright as herself. The film is very unique, the story is both odd and beautiful, and the score by Max Richter is very heartfelt. And Harvey Keitel, Sammy Gale, Paul Giamatti, Danny Houston, and Cody Smith McPhee were also exceptionally great in their roles. The plot turns from one thing to the other, and how viewers feel about it will vary. It definitely goes off the rails, and that's not a criticism at all. I do feel momentum-wise the film can be a little rocky, but I was still interested in where it was all going, and I have to say the ending paid off very well for me. There are some cornball moments that attempt to be sentimental, and the result is half and half, but it doesn't detract from the general investment that I had in the film. Now, I don't want to say too much about this movie, but I will say that I think it's worth a watch at least once. Don't look up anything about this movie, no trailers, no wiki pages, no nothing. I found this film to be a very interesting approach as a cautionary tale about the ever-changing entertainment industry, and I recommend it, and I'm gonna give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And the next film is a documentary called A Man Named Scott, and it was pretty good. Now, Kid Cudi and his music has had a very personal connection with me on a deep level for years now, and hearing Cudi talk about aspects of his life in music was pretty enjoyable. There were some pretty creative sequences that weren't really anything mind-blowing, but it complemented the documentary's personality and the incredibly positive impact Cudi has had on the music industry. And listening to some of his music being played in the film really added weight to the overall experience. Cudi is both charismatic and unique, and I learned things about him that I wasn't aware of beforehand. I did find some of the interviews from other celebrities to be a little distracting, since it started to get into the overly familiar territory involving a documentary about a music artist, but there were still welcome additions. It just didn't really add anything. Now, where this documentary takes a bit of a nosedive is some of the strange creative choices when it came to the B-roll footage. One involved Jaden, which made no sense to me because it makes me wonder why they didn't just use Cudi himself for those portions. Using an actor for some of those footages just added zero to that particular portion of the documentary because not much was required from Jaden performance-wise, so it just kind of felt like an absolute waste of time. Other than that, if you're a Cudi fan that's been with him since the beginning, then I definitely recommend it. It doesn't do anything particularly new, but I think it's still a worthwhile watch overall, and I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 stars. And last is Last Night in Soho, the latest film by the undeniably talented director Edgar Wright, and it was pretty good, but possibly his weakest film to date. Now let me get the positives out the way because there's quite a bit. One of the first things I loved about this movie was how it doesn't spoon feed you the film's time and setting. The film's setting is communicated by how the main character is introduced and her starting of her journey to her personal goals. The main character herself is also shown to feel in a different setting and compared to the current setting, which hints later at events in the film. And the contrast is quick and to the point so we can know more about her and how she reacts to the modern world. I also love how this film is sort of a twisted thriller version of the Woody Allen film Midnight in Paris, and some may call it a bit of a ripoff, but the initial concept is more of the same than the execution. Edgar Wright is also a master of blending several elements together in a scene. He proves that he's beyond his reputation of implementing just visual comedy and manages to really make a scene, no matter the tone, vibrant and full of personality. This is also including the sound mixing, the fluent camera work, the fantastic soundtrack, and directional choices by Wright himself, which helps that this movie is also as well directed as you'd expect from Edgar Wright. And the performances from the entire cast, mainly from Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, was phenomenal. And the film is smoothly paced and gradually builds up to the third act. Which reminds me, alright, I'm gonna go into spoilers here, so click to this point of the video because there's a lot to say about the third act of this movie. So basically, Eloise, the main character, rents a room from an elderly landlord and ends up being transported to the 1950s and 60s every single night. She ends up actually in the body of the young lady named Sandy, and she begins to slowly experience her fall to many men who exploited her. So Sandy's pretty much like, alright, look, I had enough of this crap, and it's revealed that Sandy has been killing every single man that has come up to that room, which explains why there's been so many reports of missing bodies for a prolonged amount of time. And it's also revealed that the landlord Eloise is living with actually is Sandy, who has been killing all those men. Great idea, right? Well, Okay, my first problem is that apparently the first act of kindness that Sandy shows to Eloise is that she offers her tea, and Eloise drinks it. But it's clear that Sandy drugged the tea with some sort of hallucinogenic drug, it's not really specified, that causes Eloise to believe that she's actually being transported to the 1950s and 60s. Okay, why does Sandy need to drug someone to communicate her experiences from her younger years instead of A, just telling Eloise about it, or B, writing a freaking book or some sort of biography and sharing it to other people? Because I don't think Holocaust survivors would ever want to put someone through those same experiences as they did by spiking them. Sandy should have watched Freedom Writers and learned that you can communicate your past experiences without hallucinogens. I mean, come on, woman, really. Did she not think someone believed her or would believe her? Did she not believe someone of the same gender wouldn't take her stories of her abusive experiences with men seriously? I mean, I'm a guy and I definitely would take that seriously and empathize with her because many women have been through that, especially during those times. So drugging someone is the solution to say, hey, this is what I went through in the past. Enjoy this incredibly over-the-top horror theme park ride I presented you in the form of hallucinogens. That doesn't make any sense. And also, you mean to tell me that Sandy just throws any caution of Eloise's safety to the wind when she experiences these hallucinogenic moments while going out at night? Would she just do this to any female who wanted to stay in that room? Has she? Why would she? And where did she even get the substance? And also, back to the killings, you mean to tell me that she has been burying men Telltale Heart style and no one could smell the high number of men she's brutally stabbed in cold blood? I guess she was betting on the garlic smell from the bistro shop to overlap the smell of dead bodies, which is impossible when compared to the piles of rotting corpses underground, and expecting garlic to actually be able to cover that smell. For real, are you kidding me? If the garlic smell is conveniently that strong, then that garlic store needs to be shut down, or somebody would have been filing complaints about the overuse of garlic smelling up the entire portion of that community. And also, we see that Eloise is reflected in Sandy as a visual to show that Eloise is in the shoes of Sandy. But when Eloise and her love interest are about to get freaky, we see that in the same bed Eloise is in, that there's a reflection above her, and it shows a violent act involving Sandy and the first guy that Sandy met at a club earlier in the film. So if Eloise is in the ghostly experience of Sandy, how come when Eloise moves out of the way, Sandy and her guy are still in the bed? I understand Eloise is on hallucinogenic drugs, but the rules of how the film establishes the effects are inconsistent and left me confused as God knows what. How come after Sandy gives Eloise the tea and Sandy is ready to kill Eloise after Sandy reveals her secret, Eloise doesn't perceive herself killing herself? You know why? Because that doesn't make any sense, but the film started not making sense in the beginning of the third act anyway. But by the end of the film, Eloise is back to being in the perception of Sandy, or I think? Are the effects that long term? Why did she not get any medical treatment for this sooner? Like, what's going on? And how did this brother survive a deep knife stab in the gut while bleeding profusely on the freaking floor and he's okay in the next scene? But my biggest problem is why Edgar Wright decided to take the safe route with this film's resolution. Had he had ended it with just a reveal and possibly changing out the fate of Sandy, I would have loved this movie despite its inconsistencies. Because as much as I love Baby Driver, the resolution felt a little unremarkable, satisfying but unremarkable. But overall, I still enjoyed the movie and I appreciate what the film was trying to say, but that third act just collapses. So my final rating is a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Alright, I'll see y'all on the flip side, and I noticed that I actually got a few more subscribers, and I cannot tell you in words how much that actually means to me. Thank you all for your support, and peace out and love y'all.